All right, guys. I'm gonna be adding people as we go. Everybody's kind of flooding in, and so I'm adding as we go. Um, there's Lieutenant Governor. How are you, sir? Thanks for joining us. I know you're a busy man.
I'm doing well. It's great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I always want to try to get started right as we get going, and since you're here, I don't want to take up any time. There's really no introduction needed. You don't know me at all, Spencer. I've been dealing with Tyler Kane, getting you onto the call, and I can't say enough about how helpful she's been and how professional everybody's been in helping this take place. Because I know you got a lot on your plate right now, believe it or not. I guess I don't know if anybody's paid attention, but I'm sure you got a lot going on right now.
It's a little bit busy, but I'm glad we could squeeze this one in.
Yeah, this is good for us because I know a lot of us down here are excited and nervous about what the future of St. George has. At least all of us in our industry are dealing with one thing really in particular, and that is a flood of people coming into our county wanting to buy real estate or get jobs and get their kids into schools. And, from an infrastructure standpoint, I know a lot of us have questions around that, but I'm going to get started straight away. I have some questions from some of our top development leaders here in Washington County. And Patrick Manning, he's the managing developer for Black Desert Resort. Is that what it's called, Patrick?
Black Desert Resort at Entrada.
At Entrada, right. And Spencer, I wanted to have Patrick ask you a couple of questions, and we could kind of just get rolling.
That's great.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Spencer, and it's great to meet you. And I think I'm going to keep mine simple, and it's pretty specific to resort property. After developing the Entrada at Snow Canyon Country Club, and it's a gated country club exclusively for single family. We're now doing a 700-acre project immediately adjacent to it. That's a full-scale resort with multiple hotels, probably 20 restaurants, lots of shops and boardwalks, and we're essentially trying to create the there for Southern Utah, and about 25,000 square feet of convention space. So it's a full-scale resort with about 3,000 total units, and we feel like one of our biggest threats in the attraction of a convention space and especially convention, but overall resort activity to be a global project is just the uniqueness of our liquor laws. So we're working with Steve Barth to work with the state and to be able to recreate some of the resort liquor licenses like you have in Park City. But there's nothing like that in the desert. And we feel like in order to be a full-scale resort offering all of the things that global visitors would want to find, we'd have to find some cooperation from the state in that regard.
Yeah, Patrick. Well, first of all, congratulations on the project. I've been following it from a distance. It's a huge deal, obviously for the St. George, but also for the state of Utah. And it's great news to hear that that's moving along. You will find an ally in me when it comes to working on those projects with the liquor laws as well. I was at the forefront of working on the Zion Curtain issue that you may have been familiar with a few years ago, trying to change that and get that resolved. Finding that balance, I think, is really, really important for us as a state. Just so you know, kind of my philosophy is, I'm very serious about protecting our young children and underage drinking, which has been the push of all of these liquor laws, is really to prohibit underage drinking, and we do that better than other states. But some of the laws don't make sense, and they don't actually do that. They don't necessarily prohibit underage drinking. They just prohibit legal drinking from people who are entitled to be able to do that. And so I've been a little bit outspoken on some of those changes, and it on occasion gets me in trouble with some of my colleagues, but that's okay. I think it's really important. And the Park City model is the right model, right? We don't have to be, in fact, people are surprised sometimes. Everybody thinks Utah's liquor laws are the worst and the craziest until you look at other states. And there are lots of states that have strange stuff on the books. I just think they should be.
Oklahoma and Texas. I mean, even Texas has some of the craziest laws depending on the county.
They really do. Even California and some of the more liberal states, it surprises people, have some really strange laws. And so we can find that balance, and we're happy to do that. We don't want to scare people away from the state of Utah for something like minor like that. So so let's stay in touch. I know Steve. We've worked together on some other issues, and we'll be happy to assist on this one.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and the Black Desert, for anybody who, I try to do a quick screen share of the Black Desert Resort, and I know there's a lot in our community. The real estate community kind of knows a little bit about it, and I know, Patrick, I was talking to a few of the people that are closer to the project, and you have some releases, some new information coming out about the project. I think starting the first of the year. And so if anybody wants more information about that, I think it's just blackdesertresort.com, right? And everything's going to be released to that area or that website. Is that right, Patrick?
That's correct. And we broke ground this Monday of this week.
Yeah, and I think again, along the lines of real estate, it's important that the agents and the industry leaders all kind of know where to go to for some of these big developments, because these are what's going to continue to drive both the economy locally, but also what's going to attract all of these people from other parts of the area or the country. So Isaac Barlow, I don't know if I saw Isaac jump on. Is Isaac on? Did anybody see him jump on? Isaac, are you there? Mitch, I'm going to go with you. So Mitch Danzy, he's the general manager of Desert Color. Mitch, can you hear us? I see him. I see him logged in, but I don't hear him. So he's I think he was just about ready to go into a meeting here in a little bit. So one of the questions that I had, so I'm going to jump into my question since I get an opportunity while we wait for some of these guys.
Hey, Rob, can you hear me now?
Oh, there he is. Hey, Mitch. Thanks. Yes, go ahead, please.
Sorry, man. We all love Zoom calls.
It's the worst.
Governor,
it's the worst, man.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for your time, and on behalf of a lot of people here in Southern Utah, we appreciate all that you've done as a champion for kind of the outskirts of the Wasatch Front, where I was born and raised, and now coming down to Southern Utah. It's great to have kind of an advocate on our side. One thing, Lieutenant Governor, that's been on the mind of a lot of developers out here. So Desert Color, very similar to Black Desert. We love what they're doing. We're excited about all the growth. Desert Color is about a 11,000 home master plan community here in St. George. And there's all kinds of questions as it relates to water that we could certainly ask you, and I'm sure you're loaded for bear on. But specifically, it's come up that the way that we count our water and the way that we look at water in Utah is different than our neighboring states. How do we get apples to apples so that when the water conversation does come up, it's not one where we're immediately at a disadvantage simply by the way that we are calculating water? And any additional comments you would have as it relates to the Lake Powell pipeline and the support that really we're looking for from the capital and Northern Utah to come and be a part of this has a big impact on our growth here. But hoping you could address that, how we look at water, and then your quick comments, if possible, on the Lake Powell pipeline.
Of course, Mitch, thank you. And you're absolutely right. And I have to be honest, this is something that I didn't realize was happening until just a few months ago. I broached it with some of our water guys. I said, look, I have a sister that lives in Arizona. I've traveled there. I've spent time in many of our neighboring states. And I look at what's happening, and I just don't believe the numbers. The numbers can't be right. We can't be this much worse or using this much more water than our neighbors. And it turns out the numbers aren't right. We're not comparing apples to apples. And so I've actually tasked them to start working on this project. And either, I don't care which way they go. We can, as long as we're comparing the same things, raising theirs or lowering ours, we've got to figure this out so that we're starting from a PR perspective, if nothing else, from the same background. But more importantly, as to the big development that's happening here and the growth that's happening here and the Lake Powell pipeline, this is something that I've been very involved in over the last year. and something that I'm very supportive of. We've had several meetings with your water folks over the past month or two. I wish it was all good news. It isn't all good news, but there is some good news coming out of it. Unfortunately, the environmental impact study that was done, and we're working toward a record of decision. That project, although getting towards the end, the data that we got back wasn't, and not the data, but just the process. There were some flaws in that process, and some concerns about our ability to move this along right now at this moment without a lawsuit that we could lose, and we don't want that to happen. And so everyone agrees that that there's some supplemental work that needs to be done on that. We also got some serious pushback from the Trump administration, and specifically from the Secretary of the Interior, who has spent a lot of time, actually grew up next to the Colorado River, and is very interested in this basin. And basically, the message is, if you don't have the support of the other states, then this project is not going to be able to advance under our watch. And obviously, under a Trump administration, we have a better chance of moving this forward. And so we are working very closely with the other states. Nevada just flipped on us. They went just they were good. Everything was good. And then a couple months ago, and we're not sure exactly what changed, but they really flipped and became hostile to it. California has always been a problem, but the upper basin states are allies and friends, and we can work very closely together with them. They are, what we're hearing from the other states is that they just need a little more time. We're willing to work through this with them and give them the time and the information that they need. And we still feel very confident that we can get there. The other good news is that I made a decision, and obviously not until January, if I'm fortunate to be elected on Tuesday, that I can actually implement some of these things. But I've got a broad support for really strengthening our water team and our Colorado Basin water team for negotiations. We've been able to do this with a very small team, just a couple people that have been working on this. Other states have large law firms and big teams of negotiators that they're using. And it's time that we match them with that firepower, and so we will be doing that. Again, the experts that I talked to still feel very good about our chances of getting this done, but it's just going to take a few more months until we get the buy-in of the other states and we're able to move forward.
Thanks, Lieutenant Governor.
Lieutenant Governor, I kind of have a follow-up with that. Is assuming that because we're all aware locally of the growth that's happening. I mean, we're at a historic low with inventory supply. Not that we don't have, we still have higher numbers of homes selling on a regular basis. We're still up in percentage of homes sold. Granted, that's just residential. But my question is, from an infrastructure standpoint, the support from the state, our local governments, I think, and I don't know if we have anybody from the city on, but we've ballooned our local budget over the last 5 years at an incredible rate. And knowing that the pipeline may or may not get done, what are some of the alternatives? I mean, do we have a plan B, plan C, and what other infrastructure pieces can you touch on that might help us get encouragement around supporting the amount of population that's going to inevitably come, whether we want it or not? It's going to come.
Yeah, no, and let me just be very clear on this. If my last answer wasn't, Lake Powell pipeline to me is option A, B, and C, and that's how committed I am to getting this done and seeing this through. And so we will use all the resources of the state. We'll bring to bear to make this happen. That being said, to the broader question of infrastructure, and this is a really important one, and one we've talked a lot about on the campaign. A lot of candidates have, but I fundamentally feel so strongly about this one. I've shared this, and some of you may have heard me share this before, but a couple years ago, I was back New York, and I was meeting with one of the largest site locator firms in the country. So they help big businesses expand and relocate when necessary. And I mean, these guys have been doing this forever. They're the best of the best, the biggest names in the business. And I just asked them, quite frankly, they said, congratulations, Utah's in our top 3. Anytime we're looking at a business that is growing or expanding, we always bring up Utah. And I said, well, that's great news, and I appreciate that. I said, but how do we stay in your top 3? And he just said, nobody's ever asked me that question before. He said, I'll give you an example. And the example he gave me was Austin, Texas. He said, Austin, Texas was always in our top 5, and now we never even mention them anymore. And the reason is that they stopped and forgot about infrastructure. They stopped investing in infrastructure. They had he mentioned a couple. There were some road projects that got scrapped. There was an airport expansion that got scrapped. And he said, that's how you lose, and that's how you diminish the quality of life, is when you're not investing in infrastructure. And so while infrastructure is the purview of local governments, and they ultimately make those decisions, the state has a big role to play in a couple ways. One, there is some infrastructure, for example, roads on the interstate highway or freeways and our intrastate highways, where we do make those decisions, and we work very closely, and we have some big projects that UDOT's working on down here. But on these others, I believe that the state has to take a bigger role, because most of these projects are regional in nature, and even though we're not making those exact decisions, we should be providing expertise and planning and all of those things to help local governments, especially that don't have, now St. George is a little different, because you do have sophistication. You've got lots of very bright people that are working in this space, but the smaller towns that surround this area that are also seeing that growth, we've seen what happens, and this is no offense to developers, many of whom are on this call, but if we don't plan right, we end up with bad developments, and that's bad for citizens, it's bad for developers, and it's bad for our cities and towns. And so we've got to be united on working on those things together. And I've put out a proposal that I'm hoping the legislature will take up, to hire some planners at the state level to assist with these infrastructure needs, and so that the local governments don't have to bear all of the burden of making those decisions.
I appreciate that perspective, because I think that's I actually was reading studies on Austin specifically. It's interesting you brought that up, because they're a population, I think, in the city limits of 1.5 million, yet the infrastructure is only set up to support about 1 million people, and which is why it's spilling over into those outlying suburb areas of Austin. And I come from Southern California, where you drive through certain towns in Southern California, and it was like they didn't even plan to have 1 million people in that small area. And I can see that kind of already starting here, when it was a couple of weekends a year that we would go through busy traffic times. Now it seems like every single weekend we're having, you could see the cars piling up. You can see the areas of town, really having struggle with congestion and things like that. And so we have 3 huge developments, and I think Isaac Barlow just jumped on. I know he's driving and had a tough run with some service. Isaac, can you hear us? Maybe not.
Yeah. Yes,
There he
I'm
is.
on.
Isaac, go ahead. I know you just jumped on. We talked a little Lake Powell pipeline. We talked a little bit about the liquor rules and liquor laws with Black Desert. Feel free to ask any question you have for the Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, first I want to really apologize for not being on time this morning. I misjudged my travel route and caught myself in a bad reception point.
I think we've all been there.
So, did you say you already have talked about the Lake Powell pipeline?
Just a little bit. We did talk a little bit about that, and I know Tech Ridge is a big project. You're the managing partner of Tech Ridge, and so I know one of your questions was around water. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, or anything specifically around water? Because I know you missed a little bit of it, but what do you have?
Yeah, mainly just if I guess I hate to say the if, but if the Lake Powell pipeline doesn't happen, do we have enough water to continue developing? Like Tech Ridge as an example is a 15 to 20 year project. So of course I'm thinking a lot about the future, and is the Lake Powell pipeline, basically a requirement for us to be able to get to the end of our goal there.
And to kind of
Yeah.
tag on to that, Lieutenant Governor, would be maybe your perspective on Tech Ridge and the Silicon Slopes as well, because I think I'd be interested to hear your perspective on that as well, because I know we have about 10 minutes. I know you're a busy guy.
Yeah, thank you. Isaac, it's great to hear from you. And I'm a big fan
Thank
of
you.
what Isaac's doing and Tech Ridge. So yeah, we did talk about the Lake Powell pipeline. I'm not as familiar with the you know, kind of backup plans that may exist here. As I told people on this call, in my mind, Lake Powell pipeline is option A, B, and C. And just want you to know how committed we are at the state level to making this happen. And talked a little bit about some of the plans we have to increase our water negotiation team in the state, to ramp that up and get just the best legal minds we have working on that project and make sure that we can get that done. Because I believe that the growth of Southern Utah is so important to the rest of the state of Utah, and specifically what you guys are doing at Tech Ridge. I mean, we're big fans of St. George. We've spent a lot of time down here. We will continue to spend a lot of time down here. My parents have a place in Sunbrook, so we're down here as often as we can possibly be. But more importantly to me, it's that it's not just a place for people to retire and come and vacation, although all of those things are really important. But this needs to be a place where people can raise their families, people can have significant careers, and can be successful. And that's why Tech Ridge is so important. Of course, we've all seen the success that Silicon Slopes has had up in the Lehigh area, the Point of the Mountain area. By the way, the Point of the Mountain project is just going to be incredible there. But I look at Tech Ridge as kind of a mini version of that Point of the Mountain project, and so I'm just incredibly grateful for those that have seen the vision and are investing in that way. And I believe, I mean, there is no reason that St. George can't be every bit as successful as the Point of the Mountain area, for the same reasons. I mean, actually for even better reasons, is that everyone wants to live here. Everyone wants to recreate here. It's the perfect place. And especially now that we can use these tools to connect, and we don't have to necessarily be right next door to other businesses and companies. And so I think that makes St. George even more viable, which is why you're seeing some of the explosive growth, obviously, because people know that they can work from home, they can work remotely, and if you're going to do that, you might as well live here.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have maybe a few other questions dropped in the chat, but do you have any other remarks that you want to touch on just yourself as we're kind of winding down on time with you, sir?
Well, let me just recognize again the success of the people on this on this call. Thank you for your leadership. I just also want to let you know how important. I mean, someone touched on this earlier, but just how important Southern Utah is to me personally, and will be to our administration if we get the opportunity to serve over the next 4 years. And I mean that sincerely, as the only candidate for governor who lives off of the Wasatch Front. I recognize how often we get forgotten, and I'm really looking to shake things up in some ways that will probably make people further north a little bit uncomfortable. We're talking about even doing, potentially, if we get that opportunity, doing our inauguration in Washington County instead of in Salt Lake County. Just looking at ways we can spend time down here. Again, that's probably a little selfish of me, but having the Capitol down here for a couple days every couple months, so people have an opportunity to come and meet with their elected officials and appointed officials, making sure that we have a geographically diverse cabinet, so that we appoint people from Southern Utah and Eastern, Western Utah, Central Utah to the cabinet, so that there is representation in the executive branch. All of those things that will help us feel more connected and make sure that we're not being left out of the important decisions and opportunities that present themselves to the state. So we'll need all of your help, but and thank you for making us look good. The economy is booming, fewer job losses in Utah than anywhere else during the most significant downturn in our lifetimes, and that's in large part because of the people on this call. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you joining in, and I know all of us would like to have you come back maybe in a couple of months, the first quarter of next year, just to kind of walk through after the election and transition from the winter months into the spring. That's when our market changes. It's kind of our seasonal market continues to change, just like up north. And so we'd love to have you back on. I know there are some questions on real estate taxing and transactions on home sales, and you could share your beliefs with that then. I think that might be a great conversation, because that's a great question. Amy Larson asked that question, but I think there's probably about a 20-minute conversation that could go into with real estate and taxing on real estate and transactions and property taxes.
Yeah, so just briefly, you've seen from the current administration, of which I'm a part, that will continue. That we are big believers in low taxes and not taxing real estate transactions. We want people to be able to live the American dream, and part of the American dream is home ownership, and it's something that Utah does very well. So we believe firmly in keeping taxes low, keeping the economy moving, and helping to grow the middle class, and those are all things that are good conservative values, and certainly fit with I know the prevailing beliefs here in Southern Utah. Will be really interesting. Just by the way, to see what happens on Tuesday. You know, at the state level, we won't see much change. At the national level, I have no idea what's going to happen there, or what the next 4 years might bring. It's going to be very interesting. I've talked to lots of experts in the real estate field, as well as economics. There's kind of two schools of thought. One is that a Biden administration will be better on the coronavirus response, and that will help with consumer confidence, and help the economy stay stronger through the next couple months, which are going to be really tough, with coronavirus cases exploding and our hospitals getting full. Of course, the more prevailing thought is that depending on how, what a Biden administration looks like, that a Trump administration has been incredibly good for the economy, and we've certainly all seen that. The GDP growth that is happening, lowest unemployment prior to the pandemic in our state's history at 2.3%. I think we're about 3.8% at the national level, and the stock market doing well. So many areas of the economy were really thriving, and so that's the big question mark. I think that the bigger question actually isn't the presidency as much as what happens in the Senate. There's if Republicans are able to keep the Senate, I think we'll be able to keep things moving at a pretty steady clip. If Republicans lose, if we lose the presidency and the Senate, then things get a little dicey, and I'm not sure where that ends up. I can tell you I can tell you that I've heard from people very close that even Joe Biden doesn't want the Democrats to win the Senate. He's hoping to have a moderate run as a president, and worries that if they have all three branches of government, that won't be happening. Now, I don't know how true that is or not, but it's certainly something
it makes a good news article, right? It makes a good news article, at least.
It does. I'm watching very closely, and so the numbers don't look good. Of course, they didn't look good 4 years ago, and things were different. But there are some major fundamentals that are different in this race right now that I think it's pretty doubtful that Trump wins. But we've seen stranger things. But that Republicans holding the Senate, that's a big one, and just really hoping we're able to do that. Sorry, didn't mean to turn this into a partisan call, but the divided government has historically actually been pretty good government for our country, and I hope we at least get that. So anyway, thanks for letting me join. Keep up the good work, and let's do this again in a couple months.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to have you on. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor. You have a great day, and good luck on Tuesday.
Thanks, and don't forget to vote. Remember, your ballots have to be postmarked by Monday if you're mailing them in.
We can walk into ours. We can walk into ours. We're in St. George. We all are just going to walk to the place, drop it off, and
you can do that you can do that anywhere in the state. Every county has walk-in voting. You do that on Tuesday. Please don't mail it on Tuesday, or it won't count. So get your votes in. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Hey guys, awesome. Thanks for jumping on. I know we got started right out of the gate and some people had a tough time connecting, but we got 30 minutes and if anybody's been on the call before, I don't like to waste any time, but do we have anybody that wants to just fill some comments? I did record it. I'll post it on the WCBR Facebook page and put it on YouTube, and so everybody can rewatch if you jumped on late. Does anybody want to comment on anything and chat about what he talked about? I like the silence. Mitch is unmuted his mic.
Rob, I was just I appreciate you putting it together, and it takes, a lot of people are always wait for someone else to give themselves a voice. Done job of making us have a voice, right? And it's important. And so I would just say there's a lot of people from different areas, developers, real estate. What we really need to do is get together and be a collective voice. So appreciate all the efforts and great job today. I think there were some really great things that we heard today from the Lieutenant Governor. There's also some concerning things, right, about the LTP. It's tough news. We got to figure that one out. So we need to put all of our heads together and come up with some solutions and be thinking through that. So thanks, Rob. Appreciate all your help.
Yeah, absolutely. Him saying doing the inauguration down here in Washington County, that would be pretty cool. I don't know if he was doing that as a, hey, we'd love to try to do that, but who knows if that would actually happen. But I think that would be kind of cool to have the inauguration down here. I don't know if that's ever happened before. Does anybody know? Anybody ever seen that happen? That would be cool. I think there was some good stuff.
Probably Fillmore back in the day.
Oh, right, dead center of the state. Yeah, exactly, right, a long time ago. Anybody else any other questions or comments and follow-ups? I want to do a follow-up call on some of these things in particular if we wanted to talk more about it. I think after the election will be a good time that we can kind of talk through a little bit more future pacing. I'm really interested in how the infrastructure, I really think we could dive deeper into those conversations and get some perspectives from the different mayors and really leaning on some of that support, because I know St. George and Washington both in particular have really smart economic developers that are in those positions of city planning, but sometimes it's about the money and sometimes it's about just the resources if we can have it and enough time to handle that flood. Would everybody agree that that's a pretty big conversation we could probably have? Yeah. Anybody have anything else? I'm not taking anybody's time. It was my wife's birthday yesterday, so I'm going to go spend a half day off and go hang out with her.
Hey, Robert.
Yeah.
I'm just connecting a couple dots here. So he said that he seemed to have a little bit of doubt about the Lake Powell pipeline, which until today, it always seemed like people had confidence. It was just a matter of time. So that was concerning. But then even just connecting the next dot, he said that it would be even harder under a Biden administration. And then later he said that it was very most likely that Biden would win. Mm-hmm. So kind of triple negative. I don't know if anyone else connected those dots or has any thoughts about why it's harder with Biden. I don't know the specifics or how much harder, if it makes it a lot harder or just a little bit harder.
I would, anybody else want to field that?
Liberal, so Biden's cabinet traditionally leans on these policies, leans like anti-growth with those. So it's likely not going to happen under a Biden administration.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that, Sean?
So they're normally like pro. What's the word? Like pro nature. What's that? I can't think of the.
Environmental.
Environmentalist,
exactly.
Conservationist.
Correct. Yeah. So it just makes it hard because there is already so much outspoken environmentalist action against the Lake Powell pipeline.
Well, I think part of it was the environmentalist piece, and when he said, because going back to the connecting the pieces, he talked about what the reports came out on, and it was a processes is the way it sounded like to me was when they did the studies, the environmental impact studies, it was the way they did the study, not necessarily the data, because he corrected himself and said it's not necessarily the data that came through, but it was how they did the data that was an issue. So I would say that it's the collection of 8 states around, because from a federal level, right, if we're looking at it from the perspective of the federal government, we're not going to do one thing that favors one state over another, right? We're facilitating the agreement of all of the states to decide on interstate commerce and things like this. It goes way back to even, right around the time of the Constitution being written, is interstate commerce was a big deal. So I would say that the reason a Biden presidency might be an issue is because states that are more liberal in the sense that they want to keep their interests at bay and they have the support of the federal government to do it, being that Nevada is primarily a democratically held, government. They're probably, and knowing that they switched, right? He said that they went from being pro to the pipeline to all of a sudden now they're no longer playing ball with it. I think that might be more about it. It might, in my perspective, it might be less environmental and more political from the sense of each state having their own wants and needs. And if we're surrounded by Colorado that's very democratic, and Nevada that's very democratic, and Arizona that's still really controlled as a blue state, we might have an uphill battle if the federal government is also led by that. I don't know. That's my perspective on it.
Hey, Robert, just a couple of thoughts with regards to the elections and how we manage ourselves. I've always been taught we really need to focus and worry about the things that we can control. And I've never seen a more important time than from a local level, we make sure that we're being represented by people that have our best interest at heart. So I think state elections and certainly local elections are going to drive the bus for us. We've been through different administrations, and I agree the Lake Powell pipeline is going to be a federal issue as much as it is a state and a local one. But I guess my encouragement is we've been through this before. We've been down this road before. Let's just make sure that we're engaged in helping control the things that we can control. Last night, after about 2.5 hours, I tapped out on the city of St. George's review of the master plan and impact fees. And I can tell you right now, that is coming in a way that is going to impact new construction in our market. So again, we just have to know what's going on and try to help influence it as best as we can. Just my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's worth another conversation too, just what that's going on.
I was going to say, can you elaborate on that a little bit, Bardell?
Well,
Bardell, I tapped after 2 hours, so I'd like to know how it ended at the end.
Well, I think that the proposal is going to be for as much as a 55% increase in impact fees. And that will go towards all the things that new construction is supposed to be responsible for. And while you can't really argue the value, I just see where attainable housing is already an issue, this becomes a pass-through expense. And that end user is the one that's going to end up picking up the tab. And while we got cash coming in from California, which is stimulating valuations, and Carl can speak better to this probably than most, but how does that impact our first-time home buyers? How does that affect our kids and our grandkids that are purchasing homes or want to? And so it's a double-edged sword. And I don't know what the answer is, but sometimes we don't get to choose the cards that we're dealt either. So let's just be involved, be engaged, be aware, and help out where we can.
Well, I think it's important that we talk about what those impact fees are going towards, right? If those fees are going to go towards infrastructure pieces that'll allow us to handle that growth that's coming in, and the pass-through expense, that makes sense. Where I see it as is that we have 11% of our entire county, from what I've heard, 11% of our entire county is private land, where the rest is owned by either the state, SITLA, Bureau of Land Management, National Park. If we have a limited supply, right? Real estate's all about supply and demand. If we have a limited supply of land to build on, if we continue to get restricted on the pieces of property that we can actually go build on, that's where it doesn't matter what we do with the impact fees. People are still going to have to go somewhere, and all that it's going to do is raise the price, and we're not going to be able to stimulate any demand.
No, but the areas that we do have control on is on restrictions, densities, we're building up, we're building out. I think there's an opportunity still for the market to sustain and support. But, and I got to tell you, this evaluation, this study that literally went hours and hours and hours last night, covered everything from public safety to transportation. It was pretty detailed, and it hasn't been evaluated since, I think it was 2016. So the evaluation was due, and I think I didn't stay for the end, but I'm pretty confident it's going to happen. And you'll see impact fees, at least in St. George City, will increase.
Is there anywhere that was posted, or is there anywhere we can go to where we can get a copy of that if they recorded it? Or
well, I think the City of St. George City Council saw it for the first time last night. My guess is that they have access to that information, but until they actually vote on it, it's just a discussion. It's not a public record yet.
Okay, roger that.
And are there follow-up meetings that will happen beyond that we could join?
McCray, I don't know what they ended up doing last night, because like I said,
I got to go to sleep.
At a certain point, my ADD kicked in, and that was it.
Nice.
Austin just posted a link from YouTube.
His city council meeting last night on YouTube. Oh, thanks, Austin. I'll copy that in. You guys can copy that in. I don't know if they can see it on the recording. If you're watching this in a future day, post the election, somebody's tuning into this video and saying, well, the governor was way wrong. Yeah, I think this was helpful for me. I hope you guys got some value out of it. I'm going to continue to try to stay in a dialogue with the lieutenant governor and try to get him on maybe once or twice a year, or at least work with the WCBR and Dee Amick, who is our president of the WCBR next year, right, Dee? And see if we can potentially, if we could get him into St. George specifically to speak to realtors and maybe have just a WCBR realtor meeting with him, interview panel type discussion. I think that'd be awesome to do it maybe a couple of times a year or once a year. I think there's value in the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and as long as they know that we're paying attention to real estate, and this is my own perspective, is that real estate is single-handedly holding a lot of the economy together. The equity that the real estate market has, the equity in the homes, the refinancing ability, the ability for them to drop their payments so that they can continue living a certain lifestyle, moving from state to state, all that's happening from real estate. And the politicians also know that that's value. And so as long as we are staying there, like Bardell said, controlling what we can control and let them know that we're paying attention to these things, I think it's important that they hear us. That's it. That was my soapbox. I'm gonna get off it. All right, guys, have a good weekend. We'll see you guys out there. Reach out to me if you have any questions. And if you have anybody else that we want to have on to try to facilitate more people on these, I think it's great. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks, Robert.